Hello. So what do you do at home when you are quarantined and bored, but you actually have a lot of technology and things available to work with and a creative child who is willing to support you in all of your crazy ideas? That would be him right there, those fingers. So, well, you put on a pseudo cooking show. So this is just a casual experiment called Experimental Kitchen. A little bit of truth to it though is that along the years I've talked a lot about using a black chicken to help repair Jing, and so if you want to know more about Jing and what that is, that's a whole different other class. But today we're going to learn how to make black chicken soup. So Chinese medicine talks a lot about the benefits, the health benefits of a black chicken, and most people don't know what that really means in terms of, unless you've actually had the benefit of meeting a black chicken before, you probably just don't know. And so let me guide you through the Western version of black chicken soup. So black chicken, it comes in the grocery store usually in a little package like this, and yes, as you can see, it's very small because it hasn't been fed all of the GMO and all that other stuff that they feed chickens to get them to be really big, like we're used to here in more developed and somewhat questionable health countries, and especially this time. So anyway, you buy a little package of black chicken, and you can get this at the farmer's market. So I went actually down, I live in Atlanta, so this is in the Atlanta's Buford Highway Farmer's Market. They didn't have any out in the freezer, so I had to ask some nice gentleman behind the counter, do you have any black chickens? A couple people looked at me like I was crazy, and then he goes, yes, why yes we do. So I have a few black chickens here at home. Anyway, the chicken is actually literally black, and so we're going to open the package up and take a look at it. And part of effective and good cooking is always having the right tools, and so you can see I do not skimp on knives because knives are important. Oh, this one comes with the head and all. That's going to be fun. So as you open the package, you can see that what we have here is, pardon those who are a little bit squeamish, but this is a black chicken. Yes, the chicken itself is actually black. One moment while I discard this in a safe place, okay? Black chicken, actually, interesting fact, is actually not black when you look at it. The type of chicken is called a silky, and it has actually white feathers, so yin and yang. So white feathers, you take off all the white feathers and you come in, you end up with this lovely black chicken. So what I'm looking for right now is to see what exactly has been included with this lovely animal. And it's Asian, as you can see, so it's coming with some extra parts that most people are not really used to having included in their traditional chicken that they purchase at the grocery store. So we're going to remove some of those pieces so that they can be separate, and get this ready for cooking. And I think we can leave the rest pretty good. It looks, there's no giblets in there, so it's empty. So as you can see, the whole chicken is black. And the idea is that it's black because it has a lot of protein in it, and all that good protein and all of that black stuff makes it for a very nutritious and healthy for your kidneys type thing. So we're going to cook it. I'm squeamish enough to say I got to take the head off, so we're going to remove that, and I apologize to all of you. And we're going to discard that, as well as the chicken feet, which I know are pretty healthy, but I think my family would be like, yeah, no, I don't think so. So we're going to get rid of that. So one moment. We're just going to cover it for now. It doesn't exist. And in the meantime, what we're going to do is get the pot hot. I usually have a kitchen towel I can wipe my hands on so I don't go through paper towels. Paper towels are at a premium these days, we all know that. And we'll put a little bit of olive oil at the bottom, because what we're going to do is saute the onions. I ran out of cutting space. Excuse me while I take care of this. I'm going to put this over here away on the side. And let's work with the onions while we wait for everything else to be done. Let's get another cutting board. Following so far? entertaining in the experimental kitchen. So onions, no real tricks. I don't have any tricks for you here on how to keep the stuff from, oh, this onion's not good. Surprise, need to get a different onion. Fortunately, I have another one. Let's see what happens here. Rinse off the knife so that we don't get all that stuff into the hopefully good onion. Take a chunk off and see, yep, this one looks better. We are in luck. Of course, that means I have to go to the grocery store tomorrow and pick up more onions because that means we're now out of onions. So this might get a little bit noisy. I don't know what the sound quality is on this recording. But we will remove the papery skin of the onion. The oil should be getting nice and warm. Put that in there and then go ahead and hope that the onions don't go into this vent that we have here in the middle, because that's usually what happens. All the food goes directly down the vent. You try really hard to keep it from going down the downdraft, but that's where it usually ends up. So I'm kind of not particular about how I cut the onions, so we'll leave them nice and chunky. It just occurred to me that we have spring onions in the backyard. We could have used those. Okie doke. Is this working? Not doing anything. So as you can see, I have a glass top stove or cooktop, and I really don't like it very much. I'll just take a moment to express my disappointment and disapproval of this particular method of cooking, because you cannot control the temperature accurately. So this particular button, if it's at the 5, it means it's got one heating element going, which is sometimes insufficient. So if you need to bring up the temperature, you have to put it on 6 or 5.5. That turns on the second heating element, which means that you burn your food twice as fast. So one is it's raw, and the other one is it's burned. And I'm an advocate for gas cooking myself. And if it doesn't go into the downdraft, it goes onto the floor. Big chunky onions, it's fine with me. I like putting a lot of onions in my soups. I just think the flavor is pretty good. There's a couple of shortcuts if you want to make this a little more Puerto Rican. You can add like sofrito, which is like a pre-mixed blend of onions and garlic and cilantro and things like that. There we go. Okay, I'll turn my downdraft on for just a second. There's the onions. I think I got them all off the floor. So I like to cook these until they get somewhat transparent, which means that they've released the flavors and opened up so they expand a little bit and they get mushy. What's mushy?
Talk a little louder.
Louder? Talk louder. He says I need to talk louder. So.
Just a little bit.
So the onions, it's a little bit white, but good enough to get going. So if I wasn't doing this for a cooking show, what I would do is I'd cut up the chicken in pieces. I would separate, why don't I just go ahead and do that? I'd go ahead and separate certain pieces. This knife is not meant for that, so you switch out to the knife. That is, the little curvy piece means that it's good for cutting meats off bone and things like separating. So we'll just go ahead and separate just a couple of pieces here. try to look for the space in the bone so that you don't dull the knife and you don't go through a lot of effort. There we go. Right there. There we go. Put that in there. And the rest is just let it go in as it is. So move that around a little bit because the onions are starting to burn. Like I said, it's on 5. I'm turn the grass thingy off. And go ahead and add some water. Move it off to the side and get a glass so I can put some water in there. So honestly, if you have an Instant Pot, then you can actually just use an Instant Pot for this. But that wasn't going to be fun for a cooking show, so I decided not to use the Instant Pot. So about 2 big cups of water like this, 2 of these glasses of water. That put the chicken at about halfway. I don't know if you can see that. And so now we've got a lot of onions, water, and a black chicken. And the next thing we'll do is actually cut up some potatoes. Actually, let me clean this off first because this is somewhat dirty. The same cutting board that I used for the onions, which already has been used for vegetables only, so I could have used that instead of having to wash this big one. But I like this big one better, mostly because that one's got has a space in one of the places, so the food kind of goes down in there. So big chunky potatoes, because people like to eat chunky potatoes with soup, and just go ahead and put that in there.
Move the glass.
Huh?
Move the glass.
Oh, move the glass. Move the glass. Experimental kitchen means experimental video. This is totally not professional. I'm gonna put the potatoes. I might need that again though. Excellent. So we're gonna put these 4 potatoes in here. And we're gonna let this whole thing cook for probably about an hour and a half. 2 hours. We'll cover it and let it cook. Like I said, the Instant Pot would be a lot faster, but it wouldn't be as much fun to do this little experimental cooking show. So, potatoes are ready. Let's go ahead and add some salt. This is Himalayan pink salt, which is my favorite to cook and eat with. And I think that's sufficient. 2 teaspoons. And this is like the little magic. This is sesame oil, black sesame oil. No, it's not. It's pure sesame oil, but I think it's black sesame. It's pure sesame oil. So you don't need a lot, really. This one kind of used very sparingly because it's very strong and it will overpower all the flavors. So that's probably about as much as you need to give it a little bit of hint of that smoky flavor that you get from the sesame seed. And so now what we're gonna do is just finish filling it up with water. And that's it. You don't have to add a lot of stuff. If we were in China, they would probably add some sprigs of ginseng, because that's also very good for Jing and for the kidneys. But I didn't have time to go to the store to get any ginseng, and I don't think that you need to feel like you have to have some either. So just enough water to cover the chicken. Potato salt and a little bit of that oil. We're gonna let that simmer at about 4.5 for about 2 hours. And then about 30 minutes from the end, we're going to add these. These are dried red dates. And we're just gonna drop those into the water because they're very hard, as you can see. They're not very squishy because they're dehydrated, they're dry. So we'll just drop this whole thing into the water about 30 minutes before we're ready to eat so that they have a chance to flesh out and add their goodness, which is also really good for liver and for kidneys. And then if depending on how the flavors come out on this, and I don't know, I haven't worked with this particular chicken before, we can always add a couple of sprigs of some goji berries. I'll get the goji berries, one moment. So you can always add like maybe 5 or 6 of these, or maybe 10, depending if you like goji berries or not. Just these little red berries. Little red berries. And they're kind of bitter when they're dry like this, but when you put them in the pot, they actually get sweet. And they get squishy. And it's just kind of I like it because it's like a little treat when I have my soup. And so my friends, experimental kitchen, that's black chicken soup with potatoes and water, and it needs to do its thing for a while. So once it's done, what you'll have is a nice chicken broth with the red dates. And we'll come back and show you what it looks like in about 2 hours. Thanks so much. Welcome back to Experimental Kitchen on Quaran TV. It's now been about 1.5 hours that we have been cooking this black chicken and this broth. And so let's see what has transpired in the interim. Well, as you can see, or maybe not, I'm gonna turn this up so you can you see that? You can see that? You see how the broth is nice and got this brownish color to it? Oh, thank you, cameraman, you're so helpful here. So you can see the oils on top, which is good. That means that the oils from the skin have released. And you can see this nice thick broth, which means that the potatoes have cooked down. And the chicken has started to release the broth, which is good. What we're looking for is some of the minerals found in the bones. So what we can do now, we have a variety of options, and we can either, we're going to turn it down while we think about what we're going to do next and discuss what some of the options might be. So I did say that we could go ahead and put the dates in, so those can start to absorb the heat and kind of plump out while we're discussing next potential steps. So this soup, the reason that we make the black chicken soup is to nourish the jing. So that's that deep part, that foundation of our body. And there's some components inside of the black chicken. I'll spare you the details, or maybe we'll put a link at the bottom of the video so you can read about it, that are released as we cook the chicken. But other things that help to nourish the jing of the body include green things. So we talked briefly about leafy greens, dark leafy greens being good for liver. We've talked about those before. This is bok choy, it's just what I happen to have in the house, and I need to get it used before it goes bad, so that's an option for us. I actually found some seaweed leaves. What do you call this? Seaweed?
Just dried seaweed.
Yeah, it's just dried seaweed in the cabinet. So you can also put that in here, and the seaweed again is good because it's got those microchlorophyls and so on that go deep into the blood and help to purify and pull out any toxins. This one I don't think has any particular flavor to it, so it's pretty bland. We can go ahead and add maybe just 1 or 2 of these to the soup. I wouldn't add too many because they're pretty salty, and so that's going to change the flavor of the broth if it has a chance to soak in. One moment. So we're only going to put, I'm only going to put 1 in just so that you can see what that does. I'm using the scissors so that you can keep the noise level down just a little bit. So it comes in this little container. You've just got your little individual seaweed pieces. These are made to be had as a snack. You can eat it raw just like that. They're actually very tasty. Or in this case, I can take this one and just drop it into the water, and as you can imagine, it's going to become a little soggy. Here, I'll lift it out so you can see it just becomes soggy like that. And it'll add a little extra green and whoops, good stuff to the soup. And you can see that the dates are already beginning to absorb that heat in the water and become a little bit more plump. So while that still cooks, I also have a can of beans, since this is basically going to be dinner tonight, and I have people to feed. There's not a lot of meat on the bones of this chicken, so there's a little bit of concern about being hungry by the time it's just a broth. So I thought I could add a can of black beans to the soup. So that's going to change the texture of the soup just a little bit. So my grandmother always told me, whenever you're going to open a can, wipe off the surface of the can, because you never know what's been crawling on it in the grocery store. And honestly, you know, first I thought she was being a little bit weird, but over the years I've come to appreciate the advice that my grandparents have given me, and so I pay attention a little bit more. So now it's just a thing. So I'm going to drain off some of this water, just because I don't want it to cloud the broth that I've already made. So I'm going to go ahead and just use the lid and drain off some of that liquid. And that's pretty good. You don't have to get it all out. And then just take this whole can of beans and put it in just like that. So that will give a little more substance to the broth. And it would, again, the healing or the nutritive properties of the black beans are really good. And so yes, it's already starting to turn the broth a little bit more of a darker color, so it's less chicken soup looking, and now it's got a bit more darkness to it. But all of that darkness is good for our kidneys, so we're gonna do that. In the meantime, while this is still cooking, I am gonna go ahead and prepare this bok choy. So I'm looking for little spots or anything that needs to be taken off. And I do cut off the bottom of it pretty much. See, sometimes in the bok choy inside of the leaves, you get these little spots because they grow close to the ground. And so it can either be dirt or sometimes bugs and whatnot. So if I'm gonna chop it up like what I'm gonna do for the soup, I'll just go ahead and open it. I'll just go ahead and take that whole thing off. And then I'll run it under the water one more time. That way, if there's any bugs or any sand, sometimes there's sand, you get all of that removed from the bok choy. So this is going to cook down into mush or nothing really quickly, and you can just leave pretty big pieces. You don't have to chop it up really fine. And then pretty much just go ahead and drop it in there in the soup. And then do the same thing with the other one. Although I have a couple of leaves here that look like they're less than ideal, so I'm just gonna cut off the tips of that. And take this, I discard my trash. Get that out of the way. I guess I could have one of those nifty bowls, those waste bowls that the cooking shows have. That sounds like a lot of fun. We're just not doing it that seriously today. So then same thing as I'll check. So see here, you can actually see the sand. This is from where it was grown. Yeah, and here as well, you can see that. So bok choy is one of those you have to kind of cut it and then open it up and then check. Usually the very core of it doesn't have stuff, but the bigger parts do. So let me just rinse that off real quick. Okie doke. And then we can just do the same as before. We're going to increase the temperature a little bit since we're losing heat. And just some big chunks on the green part and bigger chunks on the root. And this can go in. This will also release a certain amount of water from the bok choy itself, so you can see that the liquid was getting a little bit low. I'm not too concerned about that because, like I said, the bok choy will release a little bit of water, and of course it takes up a little bit of space. So now, if the cameraman will come one more time, and we'll take a look at what we have. So we have the dates are cooking, the bok choy is in here, the beans are at the bottom, and there's the black chicken. So you can either leave it like this and deal with it later, the actual meat on the chicken itself, or if you have finicky eaters like I do, then you can begin to do another process, which is you go fishing for the pieces and bring them out and start to take them off the bone before you serve. So you just do this, cover this back up and let that sit. So this is all fully cooked now. It just comes right off of the bone. Most of us are not going to eat the skin at home. We don't because it's high in fats and we've already extracted most of the good stuff from it. So what I'll do is actually grab a fork over here and start to pull meat off of the bone. Now, actually, when you're cooking the chicken, you do want to leave the bone in. This is a very important part of the extracting the nutrients, the minerals specifically from the bone. That's the reason that we cook it for such a long time, is that we want to give those minerals a chance to leach out into the broth itself. But when we get to the point of serving, then we can actually remove the bones and just enjoy the meat itself. And that way you don't have people fishing through their soup while they're trying to enjoy it. This is kind of an East meets West method. You know, if you were in China, I'm sure somebody would be rolling their eyes and saying, "What are you doing? Don't do that." Like they probably would have said with me removing the chicken feet and so on before. But, you know, again, this is trying to modernize and make it a little more friendly for the people who are actually going to be enjoying your food. All right, so you get the idea. This is what we're doing. It is a little bit hot, so I'm getting a little bit burned. So once I pull the bones and whatnot off, then all of this obviously goes right back into the pot. So we'll just go ahead and put that in there. That as well. And so we got 2 of the 4 pieces that we had removed. Maybe we'll just leave the wings in there the way they are, because they're very tiny. Here. I'm trying to grab it. Yeah, there's very little to pull off here, so I might leave that one. And then what we can do is work over here with the bigger part and just kind of save myself a little bit of effort by just using the fork to pull it off the bone directly. Hope that's making a little bit of sense for you. Of course, the fork keeps it from your fingers from burning. You can do it directly in the pot. The only caveat about that is that sometimes pieces that you would otherwise remove get left in the pot and they get served. And if you have picky eaters, that becomes a problem, but for other people, it's not. So there's the wishbone. Anybody want to make a wish? There it is right there. Take that little piece of meat, go back. And then since I've really done most of from the larger part of the bird itself from the bone, then I'll just leave the bone, I'll leave that in there to cook and continue to release the minerals. And then I won't serve that part, but I'll leave it in here for the broth while the rest of it is cooking. And there you go. So what you can see now is that the broth has gotten really thick and a lot darker. You can see the onions in there, and you can see the bok choy has cooked down and is losing its crispness. So at this point I would cover it. I'm gonna adjust the flavors in a sec, but I would cover it and let it cook for another 20 minutes, and then it's ready to go. That is really good. Perfect balance of salt and thickness from the chicken and the broth. The seaweed was not too much, and the beans gave it a little bit of extra roundness in there, and you can taste just a little tiny hint of the sesame oil that we put in there for smokiness. Be right back, 30 minutes. Final scene from, what do we call this? The experimental kitchen on Quarantine TV. We are finishing up our black chicken soup. We are about definitely 2 hours into this process. So this little chicken's been cooking for quite some time. As you can see, I am now turning off the heat because we're about ready to start serving or plating. But let's take a look and see what's happened inside. In here, what we can see is the broth has gotten very, very, very thick. We've added so many good things, and the beans, of course, are going to release some of their starch as well. And so the broth has gone from this very clear, to use the word again, brothy substance that you get when you boil just chicken, into a cloudy, thicker, more stewy almost type consistency. And it's a combination of the beans, the starch from the beans, as well as, look at the bok choy, what's happened to the bok choy. So the bok choy has cooked down. This is a potato. We're not talking about potatoes right now. These are obviously cooked. But you can see the bok choy has gotten very squishy, and the greener parts of it are just like, here's a leaf. You know, you have to be very careful because it'll just rip. It's just like any other kind of green. It's just going to come apart and cook down. And that's all we need to do. That's ready to go. It's been cooked. The potatoes, those were ready a long time ago. You can tell because the peels are pulling back, and you know they're done. And I always cook my potatoes with the peel on. I always want the vitamins and the minerals, nutrients, not minerals, but nutrients that are inside of the skin of the potato. And then let's just take a look here at what's happened with this chicken. So this chicken soup has gone from a very clear, watery broth into a thicker substance that's much more hearty, and this is just incredibly packed with healing vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, all that blackness, that good blackness for the kidneys. Very, very nutritive soup, very healing, very good for the jing. The dates those were completely dehydrated, but now you can see that they are a little more squishy. They have more, they're not going to come back like a true berry. They're going to be a little bit tough, but they've been in there. They cook. You can eat them just like that. You can just serve it and enjoy it with the rest of the meal. So just so you can see it a little bit better, let's pull it out of the shadow, and so you can see what that's going to look like on a plate. And we're going to dig to the bottom because the beans have gone to the bottom, and use a ladle and bring that in here. So the potatoes are out first and they want to be seen, but here comes that chicken and some of that good black beans. And there you go. You can eat it just like that without anything else, or for that, we have the small bowl, and if you're feeling a little more hungry and you've got more space to fill, then we have some white rice cooking in the rice cooker. So it's just medium grain Japanese rice, which comes in a big container that I like, and you can just drop a little bit of that rice in here in this bowl with all of this goodness. And that is good for your people who have a bigger appetite, if you get my drift. And this is a great way, and don't tell anybody that I said this, especially not the younger crowd, but this is a great way to get, this bowl came out with 3 dates, so I'm gonna leave 1 in this bowl. What I was saying is you can sneak your greens in to those finicky eaters that don't like vegetables so much. You can cook it into your soups and make sure that everybody stays healthy. So, last words that I'll share with you before we break from this experimental kitchen on Quarantine TV. Chinese medicine is really good at the idea of prevention. Eat well, take care of yourself, and avoid disease. You do better off by focusing on prevention than focusing on curing. So during these times, eat well, get good rest, take your supplements if you need to have those, but keep yourself healthy. It's better to stay on the front end of this than trying to deal with it on the tail end. That's all from our experimental kitchen. Thank you to our producer, our director, our cameraman, boom man, lighting man, and all the other mans who's on the other side of the camera. See you next time.